Hello and welcome back to my channel and to this special video about the costs of the trips that I made in 2023. I made a similar video last year outlining all my costs for the trips I made in 2022, where I managed to save a total of £203 and 61 pence over 33 days of travelling. Now, whenever I travel, I set a daily budget of £75, 75 English pounds, and that includes all food, drink, entertainment, local transport and accommodation. In fact, all the expenses except my flights. I finance all of my flights separately, largely by working on Christmas Day. I work in the transport industry and I am required to work on Christmas Day, and I am very well paid for doing so. So that helps finance all of my flights, well, nearly all of them. I work out my budget for each trip at £75 multiplied by the number of days away. So for example, a 6-day trip would have a budget of 450 English pounds. That's £75 multiplied by 6. £75 sterling is approximately 91 US dollars or 86 euros. A 6-day trip would require 5 nights accommodation. So obviously I don't require accommodation on my last day as I'm flying home. This leaves the flexibility of using some of the final day's £75 budget split across the full 6 days to help with the costs of booking accommodation, food, transport, entrance fees to tourist attractions and all the other expenses that I incur whilst travelling. The longer trips would require a much stricter budget, as the £75 would have to stretch across more days if I'm to stay within budget. Now in 2023 I enjoyed several trips into Europe of varying lengths, taking 10 flights, spending 37 days, exploring 22 towns and cities over the 5 trips. I had a 2-day trip visiting Edinburgh and Dunfirmline in Scotland, a 6-day trip visiting Valencia and Sagunto in southern Spain, a 7-day mini break to Lugo, Santiago de Compostella and Coruna in northern Spain. I had an 8-day trip touring the Netherlands, visiting 9 different towns and cities. But the big trip was 14 days touring Marseille, Grenoble and 5 other towns and cities in the Provence region of France. But was I under budget for all of these trips? I've used the exchange rates from the euros at the time of travel to work out all the costs in pounds sterling, the UK currency. So let's start by looking at the trips in more detail, starting with the shortest. The shortest was a 2-day break to Scotland, visiting Edinburgh and Dunfermline, and 2-day trip had a budget of £150. My flights on Ryanair cost £91 and 90 pence, and accommodation for 1 night in Dunfermline was £57 and 20 pence. My expenses, well, food was £33 and 97 pence, and I spent £22 and 10 pence on local transport. That was the train to Dunfermline and the return tram from Edinburgh Airport into Edinburgh. I spent no money on entrance fees, as all the attractions I visited were actually free. I spent a total of £113 and 27 pence, which was £56 and 64 pence, or £36 and 73 pence under budget for my 2-day trip. I had a 6-day trip visiting Valencia. The budget was £450. My flights were £102 and 12 pence with Ryanair. And my accommodation for 5 nights was £112 and 97 pence. I found the most wonderful Airbnb Airbnb accommodation, stayed with a local family, and I was made so welcome I just didn't want to leave. They really were a lovely family, and I do meet some great people when I travel, especially when I stay in Airbnb accommodation. My expenses, well, I spent £122.18 on food and £26.50 on transport. Entrance fees were £62.77, which was £31.43 for the Oceanographic, which was the aquarium complex. €36 was the actual price there, and €26.90 or £23.36 for the Biopark, which was Valencia Zoo. And there was €9 or £7.98 for Valencia Cathedral to see the Holy Grail. My total for the trip was £325.87, which was £54.31 per day, saving £124.13 under budget for that trip. I had a 7-day mini break to Lugo, Santiago de Compostella and La Coruna. My budget was £525. I spent £113.08 on my flight with Ryanair. My accommodation for 7 nights was £309.59, split over 2 locations, staying in Lugo and La Coruna. My expenses were £136.38 for food, £32.25 for transport, and entrance fees was £11.30. So my total was £465.05, which was £66.43 per day, or £59.95 under budget for the trip. My costs for this trip were as low as I could make them. I booked my accommodation through Airbnb, booking an apartment in La Coruna, and self-catered, purchasing all my food from the local supermarket. And this, I find, is the most effective way of making my budget travel as far as I possibly can. I had an 8-day mini break to the Netherlands, and my budget for that was £600. My flight was £100.97. Again, flying with Ryanair. I always try and fly with low-cost airlines because that makes my travel much more affordable. My accommodation for the 7 nights was £356.94 across 3 separate accommodations: Airbnb accommodation in Oosterbeek and Eindhoven, and 1-night hotel in Rotterdam. Food was £175.20, transport was £125.36, and I spent £15.50 on entrance fees. My total was £673, which was £84.12 per day. So that meant I was over budget for the trip by £73. But I had saved on my other trips, so I wasn't too worried about that. My biggest cost for this trip was for public transport. I took the train most days, which, although I had planned to take, this did actually push up my overall spend. My food bill was also much higher because of the Airbnb accommodation that I had booked, meaning I had to eat out a little more, which again pushed up my costs. I knew that my costs would be higher in this trip, which is why I made savings on all my previous trips away. And the videos from the Netherlands and La Coruna, Santiago de Compostela and Lugo will be coming shortly to my channel. But the big trip was those 14 days visiting Marseille, Grenoble and touring Provence. My budget was £1,050. Flights again on Ryanair, £96.48. And my accommodation for 13 nights was £608.99. 4 separate Airbnb accommodations in self-catering apartments, purchasing food again from local supermarkets, spending an average of £46.84 per day, or per night, sorry, for accommodation, which was quite reasonable. My food costs were £231.87, or £16.56 per day. Local transport was £111.14, and I spent £64.99 on entrance fees. My total was £1,042.47 total expenditure for that trip, which was £74.46 per day, just £7.53 under budget for the whole trip. Higher entrance fees for this trip, which was for the castles and the museums which I visited, and transport costs for trains, but I reduced my transport costs by travelling on the coach with Flixbus, and that all does help bring me into budget. It takes longer to travel on a coach, but the costs are far cheaper and far more reasonable compared to taking a faster route on a train. So here's the big question: how much did I spend in total? And was I under budget for the total of all of these trips? Now, you've probably worked out that I was under budget for the year. So let's run the numbers and see just by how much. My total spend on flights was £504.55, or £50.40 per flight, inclusive of seats and fast track. My total expenses were £2,619.66. Therefore, my average daily spend was £70.80 per day, or £155.34 under budget for the year. That's total is £84.44 per day if you include all the flights. And that really is very good budgeting there to come in at that low figure for all the trips that I did. As I said at the beginning of the video, my budget is worked out at £75 per day, multiplied by the number of days away. However, it's the yearly average that I take into account, and that's all down to careful planning and budgeting. Last year in 2022, I saved £203.61, or £6.17 per day, over 33 days away. And this year in 2023, £155.34, which was just under £4.20 per day, and that's over 37 days away. This means that in the past 2 years I've saved a total of £358.95 due to careful planning and budgeting. It'll be interesting to see just what next year's totals work out and see if I can save even more money compared to the last 2 years. In all of my travels, I visit mainly free attractions, with a few exceptions for certain museums and tourist attractions which I'd planned to visit and budgeted for. Now, I hope this video has been useful to you, and if you have any questions about travelling on a budget, then please leave a comment in the comment section below and I'll reply to you. I have a series of videos on my channel all about budgeting and solo travelling on a budget, including a video about how I travel and how I afford to travel. I'll put a link to all of these videos at the end of this video. So if you have any questions, just ask away in the comments section below, and ensure that you're subscribed to both this channel and my transport channel for all of my travel-based content. If you enjoy my travel series videos and would like to support my channel further, then please consider joining me as a member, where you'll find exclusive members-only videos and other content. I hope you found this video beneficial to help you plan for your trips away. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.